Preds Nation, Johnny here once again with another Preds themed video to get you through the summer, through the Preds off season until the next season starts up again next fall. I've been waiting to make this specific best of list since a certain game just before Christmas in December of 2023. As well, with how the playoffs turned out for the Preds, I will be making another list concerning that, but I will keep that separate from regular season. Yes, if you can't tell already, if you looked at the title for this video, this is the most heartbreaking regular season losses in Preds franchise history. Now, I debated whether or not to make a top 10, but there was so many to go through 25 years of Preds hockey that yes, I am making a top 25. You don't have to watch all 25. I know that can be a little draining. I will include timestamps so you can skip ahead if you wish to see who falls where. Now, this list is totally subjective. It's just based on how I felt along the way of where the game fell in that specific season for affecting the Preds in the standings and historically overall. You may have a different take. Maybe, just maybe, I left something out that you thought should have been in here. Feel free to include that in the comments. Without further ado, please enjoy the top 25 most heartbreaking regular season losses in Nashville Predators history. February 12th, 2016 versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Preds were trailing the Tampa Bay Lightning that evening 2-1 after 40 minutes. Then they would rally on goals by James Neal and Phil Forsberg to be leading 3-2 with 8 minutes left to go in the third period. And with tick, 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 tick down, Preds looked poised for a key character win, but unfortunately, Victor Arvidsson would take a late slashing penalty. Tampa would pull goalie Ben Bishop for the extra attacker. Steven Stamkos would tie the game at 3 with 27 seconds left. And then Tampa would complete the comeback. Steven Stamkos would set up the winner, scored by Tyler Johnson just over a minute into overtime. Tampa wins the game 4-3. March 3rd, 2016 versus the New Jersey Devils. The Devils would end up tying this game twice before Philip Forsberg scored his 27th of the season just over 2 minutes left in regulation. And you're thinking, hopefully, that's the last of the offense, preferably for either team. Let's just get the victory out of this. But alas, Adam Henrique tied the game with 40 seconds left in regulation. And in overtime, shortly after Pekka Rinne took a delay of game penalty, Adam Henrique ended it and would score the walk-off winner as the New Jersey Devils came back to win that one 5-4. November 27, 2019 versus the Vegas Golden Knights. There's a reason this game is ranked much lower on this list. This game wasn't absolutely devastating to the Preds. It was earlier in the season. Plenty of time to recover. They had a 3-2 lead against a team that, if you're not a fan of them, everybody loves to beat up on and make fun of. And time was ticking down. It looked like the Preds were going to get a big regulation win, and then Match Patch Ready ties the game with 1 bloody second left to go in regulation. And then the capper, Paul Stastny, scores the winner in the fourth period as Vegas won the game 4-3. December 2nd, 2006, where the Preds found themselves leading the Chicago Blackhawks 3-2 after 40 minutes at what was then known as the Gaylord Entertainment Center. Chicago forward Jeff Hamilton, who had already scored in this game, would not be denied as he got his second of the game, tying it at 3 with 24 seconds left to go in regulation, and then would cap it off with the hat trick in overtime against future Preds TV color guy Chris Mason. Yes, that Chris Mason would end up enduring the 4-3 loss as the Preds snapped their 4-game winning streak and instead would go on to lose 4 of their next 5 games before finally turning the ship around. February 23rd, 1999 versus the Dallas Stars at what was then called Nashville Arena. Fans of this newly created expansion team would start learning to endure heartbreak even in the expansion season. Now, making this list, there was 3 games from that season that I considered putting on this list, but there were so many, and considering the fact that 2 of those games, the losses helped usher in Thomas Vokoun to be the backup to Mike Dunham before he eventually took over as starter, I decided to negate those because those were bad losses by Eric Fichaud. But no, when I tell you the details of this game, you're going to see why it has so many points in its favor that I had to put it on this list. The Preds were leading their future arch rival, Dallas Stars, in the division 3-1 after 2. Mike Dunham was playing out of his mind. Scott Walker had 2 goals, and I'm sure Preds fans were thinking, oh great, maybe we're finally going to get a hat trick on home ice in the very first season. And despite not 1 but 2 Brett Hall minor penalties in the 3rd period that the Preds couldn't get an insurance goal on, a man who had already scored the 1 goal leading into the 3rd period, Mike Modano, scored twice to complete the hat trick, and Pat Verbeek, as the Dallas Stars rallied on the way to their President's Trophy season and winning the Stanley Cup, and the Preds fans would endure heartbreak early in a game they probably should have won by a final score of 4-3. April 21st, 2021 at the Chicago Blackhawks. In a road game inside the United Center, the friendly confines of the United Center, a game that ultimately wouldn't affect the Preds in the standings, but nevertheless still frustrating. The Preds were comfortably ahead in the 3rd period, 4-1, before they allowed the Blackhawks to score 3 goals in a span of 2 minutes and 47 seconds. Comfortably ahead, up 4-1, to being tied, and then 3 minutes into overtime, the Blackhawks completed a comeback, winning 5-4. January 11th, 2023, at the Toronto Maple Leafs. You know, I can still remember the day when the Preds were an unstoppable force, definitely inside of Canada, and perhaps also usually when Canadian teams used to come to Nashville to play the Predators. Maybe they can be that again, but they're not that right now. On this night, the Preds were in a seesaw battle with the Toronto Maple Leafs inside Scotiabank Arena, a game that was inching closer and closer to overtime, where the Preds could have respectively maybe lost because the Leafs were outplaying them, but maybe they could still get the gimmick point. That was until late in regulation. Mark Janikowski took a high sticking penalty, and William Nylander sets up Mitch Marner with 75 seconds left for the winner. No more scoring by either side, and despite a very respectable 30-plus save performance by UC Saros, the Preds would lose the game 2-1. November 10th, 2009 at the San Jose Sharks. Tied 2-2 after 2 at what was then called the HP Pavilion, Patrick Hornquist would put the Preds ahead 3-2 nearly halfway through the 3rd period before Devin Setaguchi would tie the game right back up again. Before the Preds could take a sniff of overtime, Sharks defenseman Dan Boyle would get the winner with 1 minute left to go in regulation, and the Preds would leave San Jose empty-handed, losing 4-3. March 17th, 2022 at the Philadelphia Flyers. Early in the 3rd period, Philip Forsberg gave the Preds a 4-3 lead on a goal that would tie him with David Legwand for the all-time goal scorer in franchise history. And I'm sure a lot of us are like, good. He got the record tied. Okay, get this home, get another goal perhaps, but get the victory. So this result is all for naught of him tying the record. But this was all for naught because under 5 minutes left to go in regulation, Kevin Hayes for the Flyers would tie the game at 4. And then Joel Farabee for the Flyers would put them ahead 5-4, which would be the final result of the game. 79 seconds left to go. Preds would record no points in the standings. Nothing to show for what Forsberg did with a franchise record, and something that's probably going to come up a little bit later on through different numbers on this list. Having a point in that game could have helped the Preds avoid facing the Colorado Avalanche in the first round of the upcoming playoffs that season. April 2nd, 2011 versus the Detroit Red Wings. Perhaps if this game was earlier on in the season, had a more dramatic impact on the Preds record, I would have ranked it higher on this list. But nevertheless, this game, for who it was against, and the comeback that happened in this game by the Detroit Red Wings should not be overlooked by Preds Nation. I certainly am confident that it's not forgotten by the fan base of the team that we lost to. Not even 3 minutes into the second period of Bridgestone Arena against Big Brother, game 79 of the season for the Preds, where they had a record of 42, 25, and 11. A 3-0 lead should be safe, right? Wrong! Over the next 2 minutes, after Sergei Kostitsyn had given the Preds that 3-0 lead, they were gritting their teeth, and everyone was nervous as the Preds were only up 3-2. 4 minutes into the third period, Justin Abdelkader tied this game at 3. And as we know with a certain playoff game, which I'll get to in another list, the Red Wings completed a comeback. Daniel Cleary scored his 25th of the season. In overtime, Red Wings complete the comeback 4-3. And then when I looked up this box score just to see everything, oh, look, Pekka Rinne endured the loss. He should have had that win if the guys had played better in front of him, and he'd have 370 career wins right now. December 23rd, 2022 versus the Colorado Avalanche. As you will see later on in this list, this team loves to drive us crazy and bring us pain right before or just after Christmas. Preds looking for something positive after stopping a long losing streak had won 2 in a row coming into this game. The Preds looking for something positive before the Christmas break had just recently stopped a 6-game losing streak and had instead won 2 games in a row coming into this one. The Preds had a 2-0 lead against the defending Stanley Cup champions Colorado Avalanche before the Colorado Avalanche cut into the lead 2-1 after 2 periods. JT Compher would tie the game at 2 with 5 minutes left to go in regulation. Oh, and then the icing on the cake. The dagger to the heart. Former Preds draft pick and a one-time player before he was swung in a Matt Duchene Kyle Turris trade. Samuel Girard scores the overtime winner as the Avs complete the comeback to win 3-2. Considering how close the Preds came to a playoff spot at the end of that season, that second point might have come in handy. January 14th, 2016, at the Winnipeg Jets. The Preds found themselves down 4-1 under 6 minutes into the third period at what was then MTS Center. And you're thinking, oh, just another loss in a hostile building that is in Winnipeg. Not exactly, because the Preds would rally on goals by Ryan Johansson, Eric Nystrom, and then James Neal tied the game at 4 with 14 seconds left. And you're all excited thinking the Preds are going to get this great comeback victory, only to lose in overtime 5-4 and a goal by Jets captain Blake Wheeler. October 23rd, 2018, the Preds were starting the season with one of their best records in franchise history. Just after winning the President's Trophy the previous season, yeah, they came up short in the playoffs, but they were 7-1, and they were up 4-2 against the San Jose Sharks after 40 minutes. Certainly, that had to be a good lead to continue the record start. Going into that third period, Phil Forsberg had a goal and an assist. Victor Arvidsson had 2 of the goals. Then the third period struck, where Joe Pavelski would end up tying this game at 4, and then under 3 minutes left to go in regulation, Victor Arvidsson, who had had such a great start through the first 2 periods, with serving a late high sticking penalty, and Brett Burns gets the winner as the Sharks win the game 5-4, and the Preds get 0 points. November 16th, 2017 at the Minnesota Wild. Though the Preds didn't start that season off on a high note, this game being one of those examples, they would go on to win the President's Trophy come the end of the season. But this game is not something you want to look back on fondly. On this night, if you remember, the Preds were up 3-0 not even 9 minutes into the second period, and up 4-2 not even a minute into the third. Unfortunately, not enough of a cushion, as the Preds would eventually crater. Under 7 minutes into the third period, the Preds would proceed to allow 3 goals in 4 minutes. And Minnesota would cap the comeback with an empty netter. Instead of the Preds winning somewhere close to 4-2, they lost the game 6-4. Sure, this game wouldn't affect the Preds come the end of the season, as they would win the President's Trophy, but it would have been nice to have that win be a little bit higher in record of teams that have won the President's Trophy. So you'll see that is why this game isn't much higher in this list, considering the epic fail in the third. January 5th, 2020 at the Anaheim Ducks, in what would end up being Peter Laviolette's last game as Preds bench boss before Preds general manager David Poile would replace him with John Hines. The Preds' performance in this game would indeed prove that the Preds had quit on Peter Laviolette. The Preds had a 2-1 lead in the Honda Center in the second period before they would allow the Ducks to score 3 goals in 4 minutes and 48 seconds. Craig Smith and Rocco Grimaldi would tie this game on goals in the third period, but those goals should have been insurance markers, not the Preds expounding energy to tie this game. Sure, in the shootout, Phil Forsberg would score on the Preds' first opportunity, but then Kyle Turris, Craig Smith, Ryan Johansson, and Mikael Granlund would all fail on their attempts before Ryan Getzlaf got the winning goal in the shootout. The Ducks won 5-4, ending Peter Laviolette's tenure as Preds bench boss. April 9th, 2016 at the Dallas Stars. Now, for anyone new to the fan base, this generally doesn't happen anymore, as this fan base is well respected. The franchise is much appreciated, as players do want to come, especially for no state income tax, to play for this team because the fans love them. But at one time, there used to be a time when players didn't want to play for the Preds. Back in the day before they got good. And at one time, one player would even invoke a no trade clause to not come and play for the Preds. Well, you know what would sting just as much as that? Is seeing that player score a key regulation goal against you where you would get no points. That April night, late in the season, in a game that was not at a 2, destined to be bound for overtime, it would seem, the aforementioned player I was referring to, Jason Spezza, he would score his 33rd of the season late to give the Stars a 3-2 win. Not only was that game tied at 2-8, the Preds had a 2-0 lead after a second period and allowed the Stars to come all the way back, with Spezza getting the dagger in on a team that said, ha ha, I didn't want to play for you, and now I got the winner against you. Not a game a lot of us in the fan base like to remember. December 27th, 2009 at the Chicago Blackhawks. Talk about getting a lump of coal 2 days after Christmas. The Preds were up 2-1 after 2 periods in the friendly confines of the United Center against the Chicago Blackhawks. Looking to hopefully grab a huge 2 points, who knew what was to come in the third period? In that third period, in a nearly 7-minute span, the Preds would be up 2-1 and then would proceed to be down 4-2. But then later, in a matter of 57 seconds, Dan Hamhuis and Patrick Hornqvist would tie this game up at 4. And this game would inch closer and closer to overtime. And I'm sure you're wondering, Johnny, why is this game on this list then? But then think about it again. It's in Chicago. You probably realize, yeah, under a minute to go in regulation, Jonathan Toews and Duncan Keith set up Patrick Kane with 46 seconds left, who beats Pecorine for the winner to win the game 5-4. Not the first time in that season that the Preds would lose in heartbreaking fashion in the United Center, but yeah, we'll get to that list when I make the playoff video. April 29th, 2022 against the Arizona Coyotes. The Preds were playing the regular season finale that season and had clinched the playoff spot, but there was still a matter of where they would finish in the standings for who they would play in the first round of the playoffs. Yes, I know, it's the lowly Arizona Coyotes that the Preds always seem to have a hard time in their building, much less the times they struggle at home back in Nashville. But the Preds had a 4-0 lead in the first period. That should have been enough. The Preds were up 4-1 after 1. That should have been enough. Then Travis Boyd and Jack McBean scored in the second period. And I'm thinking, like you are, guys, wake up. This should be enough. The Preds are up 4-3 after 2 periods. And then the entirety of Preds Nation lets out a collective sigh of disbelief as Michael Carcone and Shane Gostisbehere complete the epic comeback for the Coyotes. The epic choke job by the Preds, up 4-0 to losing game 82 of the season 5-4. The Preds were tied coming into game 82 with the Dallas Stars. They would have had the tiebreaker had they just, even with the collapse, gotten 1 point by getting the game to overtime or winning the game in regulation, as they would have, and they would have faced the Calgary Flames in the first round instead of the Colorado Avalanche, who swept them out like trash 4-0 in the first round. If they had faced the Calgary Flames, yeah, they didn't have Saros, but maybe they would have stood a more respectable chance to win 1, maybe 2 games, but that was all for naught, simply underperformance in game 82 of that season. April 26, 2022 versus the Calgary Flames. Leading the Calgary Flames 3-2 nearly halfway through the third period, Philip Forsberg would score his second of the game as the Preds looked to nail down wildcard spot number 1, and this potentially being a playoff preview, as I alluded to with the Arizona number just before this one. A regulation win would have certainly put the Preds on the path to facing the Calgary Flames in the first round. Instead, it all went downhill to hell in a handbasket in the last 10 minutes of regulation as UC Saros would get knocked out of the game, out for the season for good. Matthew Tkachuk would tie the game with 1 second left to go in regulation. And then the collapse is complete as Elias Lindholm scores the overtime winner, dooming the Preds to eventually face the heavily favored and eventual Cup winner Colorado Avalanche. February 19th, 2023 at the Minnesota Wild. Despite the run the Preds would go on later that season to get close to a playoff spot, perhaps this game was a sign that yes, they would fall short. The Preds would find themselves down 3-1 early in the third period. But fortunately, Roman Josi scores just under 5 minutes left to go in regulation. And then with 47 seconds left to go in regulation, Nito Niederreiter would tie this game at 3. Overtime, right? Wrong. Former Pred Ryan Hartman would be the one in this game to drive the dagger into all of our hearts as he would get the winner with 21 seconds left to go in regulation, resulting in the Preds receiving 0 points in this game. February 2nd, 2016 versus the St. Louis Blues. Now, when you think of the most heartbreaking moments in Preds franchise history, I'm sure many of you, due to recency bias, will think about Game 4 against the Vancouver Canucks this last spring. or Game 6 at home when you just wanted one goal, but also thought that as it got closer and closer to the end of the third period that maybe it would go to overtime. Well, there are certain memories that come close in regular season history. You thought 99 seconds left in regulation was heartbreaking? Well, in this game against the Blues in the regular season, it was a hard-fought battle, great goaltending battle between Blues netminder Brian Elliott and Preds netminder that night, Pekka Rinne. Game getting later and later at scoreless, thinking this game is going to go to overtime, right? Well, that was before Troy Bauer got a shot through that Craig Smith was unable to get his stick on. It beat Pekka Rinne with 65 seconds left to go in regulation. Preds unable to tie it. Blues snapped what was then a 4-game winning streak by the Preds and won the game 1-0. February 17th, 2012 at the Detroit Red Wings. Now keep in mind, when I made this list, I worked in reverse order from most recent and then worked my way back, and then, games got bumped down if I found one that was more heartbreaking. I used Hockey Reference as a guide and a refresher for my memory to see, oh yeah, I remember that game, as I shifted my rankings as I went along. Now, working backwards, after the Pierre Laviolette era before that, I worked through a few seasons without finding any heartbreaking regular season losses. I'm thinking, okay, when am I going to find something again? Sure, the Preds lost games, but nothing like we've discussed so far. But then I came upon February 17th, 2012. The box score before I opened it read 2-1 Detroit. I'm thinking, oh, do I have something here? 1-1 on goals by Johan Franzen and Nick Spalling after 2 periods. What happened in the third period? Pavel Datsyuk with 6 seconds left to go in regulation. What the bloody hell? I wish I could find highlights of this video on YouTube or NHL.com, but if someone wants to fill me in on the comments, feel free to go right ahead so I can remember what the heck happened. Did the Preds just stop skating or what? Props to Max Greenberg, who reminded me of this, that season the Red Wings had their league record long win streak that they were on, and the Preds were just a victim of circumstance. But fortunately for the Preds, they did not spiral into a losing streak, and we all know very well what happened between the Preds and the Red Wings come that spring in their first round matchup. November 7th, 2010 at the Anaheim Ducks. You thought 6 seconds left to go in regulation was something? Go to Hockey Reference and see the box score for this game. Yeah, you go ahead. You can pause it if you want and go and take a gander at that just to see for your own eyes how the Preds lost this game. The Preds were on the 4th game of a 5-game road trip coming into this game and were on a 4-game losing streak as well. Well, with under 4 minutes left to go in regulation, future Pred Ryan O'Reilly, his brother who was on the team at the time, he just finished this last season with the Milwaukee Admirals, Cal O'Reilly tied the game, and you thought, oh, good, maybe the Preds can get a point as the last few minutes and seconds are ticking off in this one. It's getting late in regulation. The play, somehow, I wish I could see this highlight, is in the Preds zone, and everyone's favorite Ducks players to hate, Bobby Ryan and Corey Perry, set up Paul Mora. Does everybody know how much time was left in regulation when the winning goal was scored? 2 seconds. 2 seconds left to go in regulation, and the Preds steal away defeat from the jaws of victory and lose in heartbreaking fashion in the Honda Center. The Ducks were in the middle of a 6-game winning streak, so I can't be too upset, I guess, because they were just hot at the time that they won this game. And considering what happened in the spring of 2011 between these two teams, we can all look back and smile that the Preds got the last laugh that season. October 31st, 2019 versus the Calgary Flames. If not for the inspiration for this list, maybe this list is never made. But this game is certainly a close second to what I will eventually get to as the #1 most heartbreaking loss in Preds regular season franchise history. Halloween night inside Bridgestone Arena. Picture it, the Preds were on a roll, having won 5 in a row, looking to keep the momentum going for that season. And through 40 minutes, the Preds looked to be home and cool, up 4-1 after 2 periods, including 2, count them, 2 Calle Jarnkrok's shorthanded goals. And then the third period would occur. Hey, the Preds were still up 4-2, under 7 minutes left to go in regulation. But unfortunately, the Flames would tie it for just over 3.5 left to go in regulation. But heck, Austin Watson would restore the Preds lead, giving them a 5-4 lead with 82 seconds left to go in regulation. Certainly that was going to be enough, right? Nope. Matthew Tkachuk ties the game again with 39 seconds left to go. And then in overtime, before this game could get to the gimmick, Matthew Tkachuk finishes it off with 1 second left to go in overtime, giving the Flames a 6-5 win. Not one of Pekka Rinne's better games in his career. And here we are, the reason I decided to make this list. December 23rd, 2023 versus the Dallas Stars. Coming into this game, the Preds were playing beyond what you thought they were capable of with the recent additions of Andrew Brunette as coach and Barry Trotz taking over full-time as general manager. The Preds had won 5 of 6 and 8 of their last 10, coming to this one right before the Christmas break. Wanted to go on a high into the Christmas break. Michael McCarron and Colton Sissons had staked the Preds to a 2-0 lead after 40 minutes. But then disaster struck as the Preds were only up 2-1. Late, the Dallas Stars would pull Scott Wedgwood and former Pred Craig Smith on a badly defended play from the corner out in front of UC Soros would tie the game at 2 with 15 seconds left. And before the Preds players and the fan base could blink, thinking this game was going to go into overtime, the unthinkable happens. The Christmas Grinch, Yanni Hakanpää, gets the winner to go past Soros with 4 seconds left to go in regulation. Literally, the Preds snatching defeat of 0 points from the jaws of a respectable character win against the Dallas Stars and lose this game 3-2. That loss could have definitely submarined the season. But fortunately, the Preds treaded water through January and early February before catching lightning in a bottle with what we now know as the franchise record 18-game point streak that would eventually save the Preds season. But nevertheless, this game had to be number 1 as the most heartbreaking regular season loss in franchise history. So there you have it, Preds Nation, my top 25 list of most heartbreaking losses in Preds franchise history. Yes, not always fun to remember some of these games, especially for someone like me who's been here from the start, who remembers almost all of them. Had to get a little bit of a refresher on a few. But hey, it's what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and you have to learn to crawl before you walk. So what these games all did was make the Preds a better team, make us better fans for having to endure the heartbreak, and one day it will all be for that special something that every team eventually hopes to aspire to, of winning that championship in June. So that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. As always, click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really like it and don't want to miss any content I put out here at Redemption. You can find my social media as always by clicking on a channel name. Tell all your friends about Redemption. If you haven't seen it, I put out the intro video that I will now be including with every Preds fan reaction once next season starts and beyond. And keep an eye on this channel. I will make a top list of the most heartbreaking playoff losses. And hey, if not beforehand, come back by the end of June with my take on what the Preds do at the NHL draft.